Another YouTube channel about F1?
You're joking. Not another one?
Yes, Brenda. Yes, indeed. Hello, welcome to this first video of Around the Outside, brand new YouTube channel with me, Jake. I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, so without further ado, let's get into the first video. In today's video, I thought we could look at some of the changes at the top of the teams across the grid. And I'm not talking about the drivers going into 2024. I'm talking about the team principals. What are the challenges ahead for some of them going into this season? So let's begin with Haas F1 team, and it's been nothing but a rollercoaster ride for Haas when you think about it since they arrived on the grid in 2016. Last season, their best race couldn't be bettered than a 7th place for Hulkenberg at the very first race in Australia. And of course, the elephant in the room at Haas is none other than the popularity of their former team principal, Günther Steiner, who has catapulted the popularity of Formula One in years gone by. So what are the challenges for Ayao Komatsu going into 2024? Well, number one, it's trying to establish himself as the new team leader, of course, for Haas going into 2024. A completely different background and kind of different experience, because Ayao Komatsu comes from a trackside engineering role as director of that in the team. One area though that we'll want to nail down is on tyre degradation, and they had great pace on a Saturday, but when it translates into the race, you couldn't get down of that very important factor, of course, and the longer the tyres can go, as much the drivers don't have to worry about leaning on the tyre too much. So I think for Haas, hitting the big reset button, the big red button with personnel and a clean slate for 2024, it will be a rebuilding year for Haas, and hopefully Jean will start to feel like there's a bit of return on his investment. Let's hope Ayao hasn't given his number to Jean, because, well, he'll be on the phone for a long time. Okay, let's move on to Drake's very own F1 team, or Kick Sauber, or Steak F1 team. You make up your own mind what you want to call it. Maybe the most shielded and not talked about team principals, or chiefs in this case, is Alessandro Alunni Bravi. He's maintaining that presence of Sauber trackside at race weekends, whilst Andreas Seidel is focusing on the team's preparations to move across to be a works team as Audi, hopefully for 2026. When you look back at Sauber and last season in 2023, they fell from 6th the previous season to then 9th. But really, not really a true reflection in my mind of the abilities of Guan Yu Zhou and Valtteri Bottas, of course, who brings his experience across from Mercedes, having been at a title-winning championship and going toe-to-toe with Lewis Hamilton, of all people. But you can't help but think, for me, that the shadow of becoming Audi in 2026 is a bit of a distraction for the team at the moment. But with this time and this next couple of years, you would love to see Alessandro trying to get the best out of drivers like Guan Yu Zhou and really taking him up for the next step for being a rookie. And of course, we've got the Chinese Grand Prix back on the calendar this season after 5 years away. Can you believe that? 5 years away. And we're finally going back to the Shanghai International Circuit. Zhou at his home race, it could really be the key ingredient for unlocking his potential and having that home support this season. So a big job for Alessandro this year, but hopefully with the guidance of Andreas Seidel and two great drivers and a team that's fueled with, I think, a lot of motivation going into this season, anything's possible going into 2024. Okay, let me take a deep breath. Visa Cash App RB Formula One team. Visa are not sponsoring this video, by the way. But there's lots been said about their new team principal, Laurent Mekies. Now, he's coming in to replace one of the most formidable characters in the paddock, Franz Tost. Big shoes to fill. The experience, though, you'd think of Laurent Mekies has been in sort of the background of Ferrari in the last few years as their racing and sporting director, brings that wealth of knowledge. And with his previous time at Toro Rosso as well, it must feel like a really proud moment for Laurent to come back into the team, coming back in to head the new direction when he's got Daniel Ricciardo and a very fast Yuki Tsunoda on board. And when you think back to last season, Laurent will be looking to settle things in the team. Of course, he had Nick de Vries going after the British Grand Prix, and then Daniel Ricciardo broke his hand and Liam Lawson came in, and now we're back to Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. I think, Lauren, that's one of the biggest challenges. Try and, of course, curtail Ricciardo to not hopefully jumping to Red Bull, but then trying to bring Yuki out of his shell and really hone in on his racecraft. So RB will be looking to attack this season with a more settled approach and try and bat away any criticism from certain people up and down the grid about the closer relations, shall we say, between the RB team and of course the bigger sister Red Bull team. If they don't get too distracted by that, then hopefully it's going to be a good season for RB. I have absolutely no doubt that Williams will be so excited heading into this season after what was a really strong rebuilding year for them in 2023. Going from plumb last to 7th in the Constructors last season is got to be something that's got to be applauded, and that was all thanks to the new leadership and direction of James Vowles. You have to hand it to him how he has just taken the role under his wing and bringing his experience across from those title winning years at Mercedes alongside Toto. He's silenced any critics that he can step up to that team principal role and deliver when it matters for the Williams team. He's clearly brought the best out in Alex Albon, and with everyone talking about him positively again, best 7th place finishes in Canada and Italy with great performances there. You've also got to put some credit on James Vowles' name by sticking behind Logan going into 2024, giving him another chance, giving him that 2023 season to settle in. And who knows, like with the midfield getting even more and more competitive, Williams will be wanting to try and capitalise on this momentum, try and challenge the likes of Alpine, Haas, and of course RB. Why not? This is the Williams name we are talking about. Such history in the sport, multiple world titles, drivers championships. They've been wanting to get back to that heyday. And even if you think about the performances back in the 2014 times, in that season where he had Valtteri Bottas, Felipe Massa, mixing it up with the likes of the big teams, that is something that hopefully it will give them hope going into this new 2024 season. They say in music, the second album is always the hardest one to follow up from your first, but hopefully it will be a smash hit for Williams going into 2024. Well, it was in at the deep end for Alpine in 2023. It depends who you're talking about. Bruno Fairman coming into the team with that mid-season shock of Otmar Schnaffauer and Alan Permain, Pat Fry, all just sodding off and saying, see you later. Not sure what's happening here at Alpine. Bruno Fairman had to come in and try and get the Enstone unit together. A big task for Bruno going into 2024 will of course be, again, trying to settle the team down and try and keep up the pace that they were holding on to, finishing 6th in the Constructors last time out. You had Esteban Ocon finishing P3 around the Principality of Monaco. Pierre was also amongst the success as well, picking up his own 3rd place in Zandvoort. Bruno also has a whole host of celebrity behind him, Rory McIlroy, Anthony Joshua, and bringing that new kind of stardom to the grid as well. And of course, as much as it is about the on-track performance in Formula 1, we all know it's about what happens off-track as well. Looking at Bruno's experience then, you could argue amongst the grid, his experience isn't extensive as that of his counterparts, but he previously was the director of engine development, and it seems like he'll be looking to try and get them out of the blocks in 2024. Okay, let's come on to Aston Martin. Get it out your system. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Mic crack. It was an incredible start for the Aston Martin team at Bahrain, where a lot of people genuinely were worried. Alonso finished on the podium in the first 6 of 8 races for a team that was literally nowhere before that. Even though there was a disappointment of how the season started and where it ended up, you have to take a bit of a step back and look at the fortunes of the team. Going from 7th to 5th in the final constructor standings, that is forward progress. And no doubt that progress is going to look good for Crack. It's certainly heading in the right direction of what Aston Martin will want. And let's not forget about the investment that Lawrence is putting into that Aston Martin team. He saved it from administration. He then bought Aston Martin, like the Aston Martin car company, to then place the brand back to the grid after decades away. This is the level of commitment we're talking about from Lawrence Stroll. And when you look at the level of investment that's going to their new team campus at Silverstone, phase 1 is already complete. By the end of nearly August and beginning of September this season in 2024, they're going to have a whole new complex that is going to be really challenging the likes of your Red Bull and your Mercedes and Ferrari and all the other teams. And of course the big challenge will always be trying to extract Lance Stroll to perform to the best that he can But when you've got Fernando Alonso in your team trying to lead the way, that is a pretty mean feat and quite a task to overcome. If Mike and the rest of the team can extract the performance out of both of them and capitalise on all this new investment and infrastructure, they might be a force to be reckoned with in 2024. Andrea Stella must be pretty chuffed with his first season as team principal of McLaren, of course with the backing and support of Zak Brown leading the whole McLaren brand. 98 and 99 champion Mika Hakkinen was really onto something when he predicted that his team would make a big step midway through that 2023 season, and boy did they go from zero to hero in a matter of time. And whilst he didn't snatch any wins off Red Bull, that upgrade really leapfrogged them to be real contenders for the rest of the 2023 season. It gave Lando Norris 6 P2 finishes in the rest of 2023, and let's not forget about his teammate Oscar Piastri, who picked up the sprint win in Qatar, which at that point the McLaren looked like it was on a exponential trajectory. The challenge going forward then in 2024 for McLaren will be keeping up this momentum, unaware of how much teams of course have progressed over the winter break. And although the driver pairing of Lando and Oscar all looks a bit hunky-dory, there's no doubt that they will be continuing to push each other, no more than Oscar, because he's really found his mojo in that McLaren team. It's fair to say though that Lando showed his class. He lived up to the rightly big respect that's being placed on his name as a future world champion, and also there's no worry now that he'll be running out of the garage to any of his rivals because they've secured that new multi-year deal. Lando believes that McLaren is the way forward, so that challenge has kind of been pushed aside. So Andrea just needs to keep focused on the task ahead, on track for 2024, and not try and get dragged too much into the conversation that's been had by Zak Brown behind the scenes about RB and Red Bull's closer and closer relationship. But I guess there's always time for politics, right? It's Formula One. Okay, now we're getting serious, and for me, Ferrari have the trickiest season in balancing that bombshell that landed before the cars have even hit the track. Fans, pundits, and even the rest of the paddock haven't even had a chance to eat their breakfast going into the new Formula One season, to then take in this news that Lewis Hamilton's going to be driving for bloody Ferrari in 2025. And you think with that might come a lot of micromanagement from Fred Vasseur. That might be one of his big challenges going forward in this new season, to then inevitably know what's coming in a year's time. And he doesn't seem like the kind of guy though that would really have time for all of that small talk and micromanagement, because I mean, let's just remember this moment from the Las Vegas practice sessions.
I'm not sure that is the topic for me today. Not, we had a very tough FP1. This will cost us a fortune.
Of course, the biggest challenge, I guess, that always remains with Ferrari is that it's Ferrari. It's got the legacy, the history in the sport. It has that prestige, and that prestige only says one thing, and that means winning in the scarlet red. Everyone loves the scarlet red Ferrari, and anyone who says that they don't is probably lying to you. Whenever you're walking down the street and you see a Ferrari 458 playing your F1 computer game, which car are you most likely to go for? You're probably going to go for the Ferrari. Let's not forget, the outbound Carlos Sainz did win a race for Ferrari in 2023 at the Singapore Grand Prix for probably the only bad day in the office that Max Verstappen had last season, where there was just no performance or pace in that Red Bull, and Ferrari capitalised on it. So they've clearly got the potential and the ability to be there when it matters. And even though Charles didn't win a race in 2023, he did take the head-to-head crown in the intra-team battle 11-9, and there's no doubt he wanted to sustain that internal pressure going on throughout this season and kind of really cement his position now as the team leader, if he can, going into 2025 before the GOAT Lewis Hamilton turns up at the door. But remember, this is Ferrari, and they want to be right back up there in the mix. You know, those glory days back in the early noughties, winning 5 titles on the bounce. This is what Ferrari is all about. That is the sights that they have set, and hopefully Fred Vasseur can be the person to take them back to those days after all the turbulence and attempts of the last few years. Well, P2 in the Constructors' Championship, and you'd think this guy would be a happy chappy, no? Well, not for Mercedes, and team principal Toto Wolff will have been dealing with that team's drop in performance, probably not in the best way. Ever since they went in that direction of the new Zero Pod with a really aggressive strategy and style, they've been trying to play catch-up ever since to the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull, and now you could even say Aston Martin and McLaren in recent times. But they took a gamble on their design philosophy for 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton and future world champion in waiting George Russell. It must have been pretty hard to motivate those two drivers in the last couple of years, and equally keep heads held high in the team as much as Toto Wolff or any other engineer team personnel in that Brackley base. And going forward, the biggest task for Toto will be, of course, filling the obvious void that Lewis Hamilton leaves at the team's peril, but it'll also be keeping an eye on this season ahead, trying to deliver that illustrious and formidable 8th world title that will be a record-breaking achievement for Lewis. What a story and full circle moment it would be to try and cap that off after the injustice that they felt from Abu Dhabi in 2021. I guess the other thing as well will be trying to keep all of the staff, that they don't run off with Lewis to Maranello and knock on the door 1,000 miles away and go, hey, can I have a new job with Lewis please, because I think he's going to do quite well at your team. But on track this season, of course, Toto will be wanting to go out on a high for Lewis, and actually having James Allison reintegrate back into the team as technical director, he'll be hoping that that expertise is finally going to pay off, that know-how, that familiarity, and seek redemption for what happened in 2021. And last but not least, Red Bull. I don't want to get too much into the politics here, but let's assume things stay the same for Red Bull in 2024. It was total domination for Red Bull in 2023. There's no doubt about that. And not to discount the team or anything, but it was basically Team Max Verstappen, right? So of course, what is always the challenge for a team that has been up there on the top step of the podium for record-breaking consecutive races and podiums and fastest laps and pole positions, was to stay there. And there'll be nothing more that Max will be wanting to emulate than the legacy of Sebastian Vettel at the team, winning 4 consecutive world titles for his Red Bull team. And if we're being honest, from what we've seen over the winter and this early murmurings of the 2024 season, you can't really see anything being changed, as that advantage they had last season will be pretty impossible to try and throw away. And the funny thing about it was they probably got to like the 4th or 5th race in 2023 and thought, yeah, Adrian, I think we can start work on next year's car. I think we are absolutely wiping the floor with the grid this year. So yeah, you just sit back and relax on your drawing board, mate. So apart from the obvious of trying to stay at the top, I guess the other challenge will be, as there's always a bit of a curse, that second seat curse at Red Bull, trying to really finally extract the best out of Sergio Perez at that team. And when we talk about the best, we know that Sergio has got the talent. He's a great driver. They threw him a lifeline after what happened with Racing Point. So hopefully Sergio can get equal with Max Verstappen, even though the car is more centered and built around Max, of course, being the lead driver in the team. But Red Bull being as ruthless as they are, if Sergio doesn't start to perform and Daniel Ricciardo is doing really well at that RB team, or any other hot shots they've got in the Red Bull driver program, then who knows what might happen in 2024 with that seat. So that's another challenge, a constant challenge that Red Bull have always got, which they kind of put upon themselves. So as much for the on-track action, let's hope that the off-track discussions and events don't taint too much of what could be a really good season for Red Bull again in 2024. Wow. Well, that was the first video for Around the Outside, brand new YouTube channel for F1 and motorsport that hopefully I would really like to see grow into a really cool community of like-minded fans and enthusiasts and nerds of Formula 1, but also people that are maybe just getting into the sport more and more in these last few years. It's Jake here, and I've loved chatting to you today, and we'll do it again soon.